Anything Ghost, number 316. The 19th anniversary of Anything Ghost. Welcome to Anything Ghost. I'm the host, Lex Wall. This is the 19th anniversary of Anything Ghost. I started it in, I think it was January 29th of 2006. I can't believe it's been running that long. In fact, that song at the beginning was a theme I'd written for my favorite podcast at the time called the Haunted New Jersey podcast. And they already actually had intro music, pretty cool stuff. So they didn't use my song. But then they began using it in the background at the beginning while they talked about things. So I decided to move it over to my podcast. Move it off of my podcast. So after about 3 episodes, I wrote that theme song that you now are all familiar with. And I'll play that at the ending when we exit the podcast. Anyways, I realize this episode is running late, but some things came up that knocked me off track. For one, our dog, Jetty, of 15 years, she was a lovely creature. She passed away from cancer. Well, we actually had to put her to sleep, and we did it in our home. And that's always difficult, but it was pretty tough because we made her the center of our lives. And so that was a tough thing to deal with. And then right after that, we both came down with COVID, even though we're vaccinated. Actually, I was overdue for vaccination, but it actually wasn't too bad. It's kind of like a mild flu, but it did knock my voice out for a few weeks, so I wasn't going to record then. And then after that, we got a new pup, and his name's Ziggy, and we got him from Mexico. And they told us he was, I think, 10 months to a year old, but no, he was, if anything, less than 8 months old. And he's been a lot of work, but he's a great little guy. And then, let's see, so I guess that's all I'll throw at you for now, and let's move on to 2025 and the 19th anniversary of Anything. Oh, and by the way, if you hear a lot of excess ghost dog stories, that's because I mentioned about Jetty's passing on Facebook, and then I thought I was going to do a special episode with a lot of dog ghost stories, but that got held up, so now it's all merged into this 19th anniversary episode. So anyway, let's move on to 2025 and the 19th anniversary episode of Anything Ghost. Happy New Year. We're going to start things off with a story from Marton in the U.S., an unexplained experience when I was 16. When I was around 16, I woke up one night to use the bathroom. The bathroom door was across the hall from my bedroom, with the main bedroom at the end of the hall. I got out of bed and was only thinking of going to the bathroom and then heading back to bed. But when I stepped out into the hall, I was overcome with a sense of dread, like something was coming up from behind me, and fast. It was not the first time that I had had that feeling in the hall. I had experienced it many times over the years, sometimes during the day, and sometimes at night. There was never any reason as to why I would sometimes get that feeling. And as soon as I would step out of the hall into another room, the feeling would go away. That night, I did the usual and hurried into the bathroom and went to close the door behind me but it wouldn't close. It stopped about an inch from closing, like something was blocking it from moving any further. My first thought was that it was likely my dad. He must have been on the way to the bathroom too, coming from the main room, which would explain why I thought someone was behind me. I figured he was playing one of his jokes. But I couldn't have been more than wrong. I opened the door to see a dark hooded shape with bright yellow eyes staring right at me. The skin was dark and had a similar texture to that of a bird's foot. I went to slam the door, but it still wouldn't close. I tried opening it a small way and slamming it a few times before I noticed that there was something sticking in the latch. It looked like a scaly, misshapen finger with a long nail. I tried slamming it a few more times until the finger finally withdrew. I quickly locked the door. That was when the whole door started to shake. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes, I heard it speaking in my mother's voice. At first, it was nicely asking me to open the door, but quickly turned nasty, saying things my mother would never say. Even the way it gradually faded away, sounding like it was going off into the distance, didn't make any sense. Once the door stopped shaking and my mother's voice was gone, after about 5 minutes where I was trying to calm myself down, I left the bathroom. The house felt calm. I looked to my parents' room and saw they were both asleep. Then I went back to my room and hoped for the best. Nothing else happened that night or anything even close ever again. I don't know if it was a dream. It didn't feel like it. Everything was as it really was, with no strange little differences you'd expect in a dream. And also, while I had been in the bathroom, I had tried to move a big wooden cabinet full of shampoo bottles and other things my mom had stored up. I was unable to move it even a bit. The next day I tried to move it again with the same result. I had never tried that before. To this day, I don't know what it was, but I'll never forget it. And that's a crazy, scary experience from Marton I'm going to say the UK now. I said the US at the beginning because he did say mum in here, and that's more used more in the UK. So when you send in stories, try to let us know where you're from. If you don't want to tell, that's fine, but it helps the listener a lot to understand where the story's coming from. And thanks again. The next story is from Derek in the U.S. New Year's Eve story. This story took place at my aunt's house just after midnight on New Year's. When my cousin got to his house, he quickly got ready for bed, and I followed. His door was closed and at a 90-degree angle to his brother's room, which was open. I could barely see him sleeping. At another 90-degree angle was the bathroom, and next to that was the linen closet. As I went down the dark hallway to get some blankets to put on the couch where I was going to sleep, I was looking in the linen closet, squinting my eyes to find some sheets. Then, something said, "Look to your left." And when I did, what I saw chilled me completely. I saw an older woman staring down at me. She was hovering approximately 8 feet off the floor. She had both of her fists under her chin, clenching them very strongly, and her teeth were also clenched together so tightly as she looked down at me. I looked at her and I was surprised to see an apparition. I'd always wanted to see one, because a lot of my family said they have seen them. I turned to the sheets I had in my arms from the linen closet and buried my face in them, reciting the date, my age, and then pinching myself. I looked up. She was still there, clenching her fists and gritting her teeth and staring down at me. As I looked up at her, I looked around, and looking through her, I could see my younger cousin sleeping peacefully. As I stared at her, I could tell she was wearing a pair of silk pajamas and a silk robe, and they were gently flowing back and forth. I could make out every detail of her, and yet she continued to grit her teeth with both her hands under her chin, squeezing like she was in pain or trying to scare me. I put my face back into the sheets and said my full name and address, looked up, and she was still staring at me in the same position with her nightgown slowly moving as if a slight breeze was in the house. I studied her as I looked up at her and her gaze. At that moment, I decided to head to the bathroom, and she disappeared. And there's a creepy story from Derek on New Year's Eve. And thanks for sending that in, Derek. And as promised, this is a dog ghost story. It was from 1914, and it was in London. The most extraordinary of dog ghosts was the dog Omance. It was a dog ghost, but not the ghost of a dog. According to the account given to the Bishop Rattray by William Soutar, the Perthshire man who saw it in 1728, it first appeared vaguely as something like a screeching fox, which dogs refused to chase. Next time, it was a big, dark gray dog which touched him on the hip, and the hip remained painful all night. After several such appearances, the phantom dog took to speaking and confessed itself to be David Soutar, who had killed a man 35 years before and now appeared as a dog, because a dog had been with him when he did it. Human bones were found buried under a bush at the spot indicated by the ghost. Creepy. Okay, so it was a dog ghost, but it wasn't a dog ghost. So I guess a guy had passed away after murdering someone, and there was a dog with him. So when he came back as a ghost, he came back as a dog ghost. I'm going to share one more story about dog ghosts, again from a news article, and this was from 1911, and it was in Cleveland, Ohio, in the U.S. And it's about an apparition of a dog that comes back for its favorite treat. And I guess there was a thing called pig knuckles. You can kind of imagine what that means. I'd never heard of it before. But here's the article. It may not be believed generally, but Joseph Hahn, who conducts a cafe at 1746 Pan Avenue Northeast, says it's true. And John Lozaris, his bartender, says it's true. And Alvador Leon, a wine salesman for the Swiss Colony Wine Company, says it's true. And John Warner, a contractor at 1423 East 2nd Street, says it's true. That the night before last, a ghost dog was seen in Hen's Place. It was between midnight and 1 a.m. The dog was recognized by Hen as one of his own for 7 years. 3 years ago, the dog had been killed by a Payne Avenue car. One of the most inexplicable features of the strange case is that the ghost dog appeared on one day when Hen had pig knuckles for lunch. The dog in life was very fond of pig knuckles, and this may or may not account for the apparition. The authorities are agreed that the dog was seen plainly, distinctly, and unmistakably in the dim light of the saloon just after Hen had turned out most of the lamps, preparing to close the place for the morning. They are also agreed that the dog stood still and wagged his tail until Leon suggested that as a test of the ghost dog's being, that a material can be tied to its ghostly tail. Then the dog just faded into the atmosphere. The 15-cent size can that was to have been tied to the tail of the dog sat on the bar for some minutes. When Hen's cat, a real live cat and not a ghost cat, returned from a visit to the neighbor's house and meowed to get in. It was admitted, and the can was removed from the bar. At that moment, after they removed the can from the bar, the ghost dog reappeared. The cat must have seen the ghost dog, because its tail grew larger, and it arched its back, and with one very large yowl, the cat leapt onto the back of the bar, and the ghost dog, making no sound, stood looking up at it, wagging its ghostly tail. Leon, standing at the front of the bar, kicked at the dog, but his foot went right through it. The authorities, who were quoted above, say the dog then just faded. At that moment, Hen, the bar owner, chastised Leon for kicking at his ghost dog. The 4 witnesses to the 2 appearances of the ghost dog are certain that they saw it, and they say the facts of the case, with the exception of one detail, are all true. That detail was that Leon had been talking about his mother, who had been dead 10 years, and who always loved dogs. Leon said his mother's name was Labrada, and that she had died in Madrid. Hen went on to say, I recognized the ghost dog immediately. It was named Fido in life, but since it has appeared in ghostly form, I have changed its name to Banquo. I don't think Leon did the right thing in trying to kick it and to tie a can to its tail. But I'm going to have pig's knuckles for lunch tomorrow, and we'll see if I can coax the ghost back. If the ghost reappears, he will be welcome. He will be treated right, and will always have a home here. He was a good dog in life, and he was my friend. Carrying on now with some self-narrated stories from Jasmine in San Diego, California.
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I live in California, and I have some stories to share. My first one, so about 15 years ago, I lived in Richmond, Vermont, on a dead-end road along a creek in a house that was newer and split into 2 levels, and we lived on the bottom apartment. When you came in, you were facing the kitchen and were standing in the living room, and then down the hall to the left were our bedroom on the right, and then the bathroom was further down on the left with a spare room at the end of the hallway. From our bed, you could see diagonally into part of the kitchen, and I lived there for maybe a year. Throughout that time, I would often wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and would be able to see a little more into the kitchen, but not more than like the first third of it as I turned to go down the hall. Some nights there would be a green glowing light in the kitchen. It didn't move or anything, but was there, and it always looked like there must be like a ball of green light or some green light source in the deeper part of the kitchen that I couldn't see for that glow to even exist. The first few times it freaked me out a little, but I assumed I just didn't remember about some light source in there. But as it happened more, I started to get scared more and wasn't sure I wanted to find out if that was right or not. Eventually, I started looking for where the light could be coming from on nights that it wasn't there, and I couldn't find a way to recreate it. The microwave and stove clocks weren't bright enough to make a glow near them, let alone in the whole kitchen. Uh, there's a small opening in the wall to a nook where there was a window, but there was only one street lamp that was never green. I asked my neighbors once we started hanging out with them, and they didn't know what it could be either. So I started not wanting to use the bathroom at night in case the light was there, and like, something might happen. So when I couldn't hold it, I would just close my eyes and feel my way to the bathroom down the hall. At one point, I did get my boyfriend at that time to go check, but he didn't know what I was talking about, didn't see anything. After a few months of this happening randomly, I decided to, speak aloud to it, or probably just the air, while I was sitting in my living room and looking into the kitchen. And I was basically like, hey, I'm not here to mess with you, so please don't mess with me, and we can just exist in this space separately but together. And I think I was also like, please don't let me see you. But to this day, I have no idea what I saw there. But what happened in my next apartment was much, much worse, and probably like the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Hi, this is Jasmine from California. Here is another story that happened. If you heard about the green light in Richmond, Vermont, this happened right after that. But the first time I lived by myself was about 15 years ago in Bristol, Vermont, which is a very small town in the middle of the state in the woods. I lived in an apartment in a small, older complex, and there were stairs to the first floor outside, then another small flight of stairs up to my apartment only after you entered. When you entered my apartment, you're standing in like this kind of long kitchen, and my bedroom door was directly to the left with a bathroom right after that, sort of at the end of the kitchen. When I lived there, I spent most of my time in my bedroom because it was the only place that had a TV. When I was sitting in my bed, I would be in the opposite corner of where the door was, making it so the TV was on the wall that had the hallway on the other side. And all the doors in that house are really heavy wood, so I would hear if anything opened or closed at any time. One day, in broad daylight, I was sitting in bed watching TV with my door shut when the room suddenly felt heavy and thick and very, very bad, like just so bad. I can't explain it. Just absence of good. Um, then I heard one of the scariest sounds I have ever heard in my life. It still gives me chills to this day to think about. It was as if just an enormous claw was being slowly dragged down the outside of my wooden bedroom door. It was repeating, and I sat trying to be as still as possible, staring at the door, thinking I was going to die for what felt like forever, but was probably like a minute at most, probably less. And I didn't know if I could defend myself. I thought, I definitely didn't think it was a person, so I was like, there's nothing I can do. And I didn't want to move at all because I didn't want it to hear me. So I just sat still, and then I did the only thing I could think of, and I just put the blankets over my head like a kid and just kept thinking, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop, make it stop. Please go away. Until suddenly the sound stopped and the room felt normal. I stayed under the blankets for a little while longer. And then I like came out slowly and found my phone, um, and called a friend to come over. I had a spare so they could let themselves in to check for murderers or monsters. And then I came out of hiding. There was no sign of anything having happened. No scrapes on any side of any of my doors. No sign of a break-in. I would have heard my front door open and close if they had found a spare if someone did break in. It was as if nothing happened. And when I tell the story, everyone says, what if you fell asleep? You were in bed. Totally understand that. That's one of my first thoughts when I hear a lot of stories too. But I know that I was awake. I completely know this. I have had wild sleep issues my entire life, talking in my sleep, grinding my teeth. I slept off when I was a kid. I also, like, I've had night terrors throughout my life, get stuck in dream loops. I can lucid dream. I know what it feels like to find out I woke up but was still in a dream. I know what it feels like to be stuck in a dream. I know what it feels like to just be regular dreaming. I know when I'm awake, because I've had to figure that out through life. So I wasn't even laying down when this happened either. And again, it was broad daylight. If it was the neighbors, it would have come from where I was sitting against the wall. And as you can see, I have gone over every possible explanation with anyone who will listen, for like the past 15 years, and there is no explanation. I would love for someone to be able to explain it away so I can stop worrying about it, but there just isn't anything. So So hopefully it just stayed in Vermont or went away forever, um, and I'll never deal with that again. Hello, this is Jasmine from San Diego again. I have another story, or it's kind of like a couple stories in one. So I recently moved here to California, but had lived in New Hampshire for 8 years prior in what I think was a haunted apartment slash split level house. I want to believe it was electrical issues and, our imaginations, but there was so much creepiness that I don't know. We lived at the top of a three-story house that was about 120 years old. And when you came into our apartment, you were in the kitchen with the bathroom to your left. Then you walked through the kitchen into the living room, and my office was directly to the left from there. And then our bedroom was at the far end of the living room, making it so you could walk from the entry door straight on through to the bedroom and past the office. Everyone who lived there had odd things happen, regardless of what floor they lived on. And my landlord, who lived on the first floor, heard stories from tenants for 20 plus years. My boyfriend travels for work on and off for about 70% of the year, so I'm often alone and the only one touching things or in rooms or whatever. Many tenants were convinced there's a ghost cat that opens cabinets and doors and could be seen out of the corner of your eye or knock things over. I had the cabinets issue, but my boyfriend and I both have problems remembering to close cabinets, so I decided that was us or our two actual alive cats. I would see what I thought was a cat out of the corner of my eye all the time, even when I had left the room with that both my cats were just in. But that could have been shadows. Some nights I would feel a cat jump onto the bed and seemingly lay down, but both of my cats were already in the bed snuggling up against me, so that I knew exactly where they were. My cats sleep with me every night, so I know what it feels like for a cat to jump up on my bed. And the first couple of times I was scared, but kept telling myself, you love cats, you love cats. Then it didn't bother me because I really do love cats. And if I'm going to be haunted, I'd much rather be by a cat. My cats would often stare at the doorway between our living room and kitchen, or between the living room and bedroom. The house was old, so I figured they heard mice or something. That is until my coworker saw something unexplainable. I worked remotely, and my office door opened to the living room near the kitchen doorway, as I said. And my desk was against the far wall, so my back was always to the door. And I usually had it open so my cats could come and go. One day I was having a one-on-one meeting with a coworker, and she asked me when my boyfriend got home. I told her he wasn't home yet, but would be in a week, and she just stared at me for a moment before asking if anyone was over. I said, nope, just me and the cats. And then she very reluctantly told me she could have sworn she saw someone tall walk past my office door where my camera faces, going from the direction of the kitchen towards the direction of the bedroom. I started closing my office door after that, or I would be so distracted in meetings, staring at my camera, waiting for something to go by, and I just didn't want to know if there was something. Um, the first scary thing that ever happened was in our bathroom, connected to the kitchen. We had two light switches. One turned on the regular light and fan, and the other turned on only the red heat lamp, and both made a loud click sound when you turned them on and off. My boyfriend likes his showers to be like a sauna, so he always used the red light, often with the regular light slash fan off. I would occasionally and sometimes left the regular light off because it was calming to be in the dim light and shower without the fan sound. He always closed the door to keep the warmth in. One day, I was doing this and everything was going along like normal until I was shaving my legs at the end. And all of a sudden, I started just thinking, like, what if there's a ghost in here? It was really strange, but I dismissed the thought and continued. Because, sometimes I'm like, ooh, what if a murderer is going to get me in the shower? Like, whatever. Then I heard the light switch click and the regular light and fan came on suddenly. My first thought was that it was my boyfriend pranking me because he does love to do that, so I whipped the curtain open, yelling his name, expecting him to be there, and no one was. I looked around the small bathroom and saw nobody. I then realized I would have heard the door open and close and became terrified. I flung the door open, screaming for him, and made him stay in the bathroom while I finished showering. After that, I was scared of the bathroom and stopped using the red light, but kept telling myself, like, yeah, it must be electrical, even though I know I heard that switch. My boyfriend was sure it was electrical, so he continued using the light. And not long after, the light and fan would just start turning on and off randomly. It was almost always while using the red light, but not always. Um, More often than not, it would happen after my boyfriend had left for the day, leaving all the lights on in the bathroom. And I could hear through my office uh, wall when the fan turned on and off, and it would. and I would just be sitting there like trying to get through a meeting so I could go turn it off. And sometimes it would just come on and stay on. Other times it would turn on and off intermittently. It was not consistent. And it happened more often when I was alone. This scared the crap out of me. And even now across the country, I'm kind of freaking myself out writing out about it. So usually the switch would stay in the off position. So we decided it must be electrical, but sometimes it happened when no lights were on. Just suddenly one of those lights would be on or both and go on and off or whatever. So one night we had some friends over for a game night, and later in the night the light thing started happening. So I told our friends about it. My boyfriend pulled out one of our Ouija boards to jokingly ask what the bathroom ghost wanted. I don't believe in Ouija boards being intrinsically mystical or supernatural or negative, especially now that they are mass-produced pieces of cardboard that you can get in cute themes. I do think that some people can contact entities or energies or whatever, and that things like Ouija boards assist them, but that the power is like in the person, if it exists at all. So anyway, I was still scared, but couldn't resist a challenge, so I agreed to do it. One of my friends didn't participate out of fear, but the rest of us did. Right away, it was obvious we were moving it around, and it was funny until the lights in the bathroom started turning on and off rapidly and then slowly. I was suddenly a believer in the board and decided the game was over, put that planchette on goodbye, and said aloud, "Goodbye, we're done. We're closing this off, please stop." And no one had to pee after that. There wasn't much in our apartment after that, aside from the kitchen feeling very scary some days and totally fine other days. We had a little like galley pantry thing where the sink was like sectioned off from the rest of the kitchen, and it had a little cutout between there and the rest of the kitchen, like a little window, and it faced the bathroom door. Sometimes when I would do the dishes in there, it felt so creepy that I couldn't even look through the cutout and would get out of there just as fast as possible, just stop doing the dishes. Others noticed this as well, particularly if I wasn't home while they were there. I figured it was just the fear of the bathroom messing with my head until like the last week we lived there. So this was about 3 months ago. I was washing the dishes as I was packing them, just sorting things. And I had put some pots in the sink to fill with soapy water while I ran to my office quickly to just make sure no one from work was needing me. When I came back, the sink was off. I specifically remember turning the sink on for the pots. No one else was there. My cats were in the kitchen. Nothing. And I was like, okay, I guess now's not the time for dishes. I just turned it off, went out on the porch with cats until my boyfriend got home. Maybe it was just trying to say goodbye. I don't know. Lastly, my landlord fully believes the house is haunted to the point where he named the ghost that he thought lived in his first floor apartment / the basement under. Sometimes the basement felt claustrophobic, like you're being watched, and like it might even be darker than usual, so I would dart in and out very quickly. Other times, it was just a normal basement, and I could hang out in it and go through stuff, whatever. The same could be said of his apartment occasionally, but not as often as the basement. He also had a light and fan in the living room that would turn itself on and off, and I swear it would happen when we were talking about Steve. That's what he named him, the ghost. Someone did die in a fire in our apartment, and my landlord found pet remains in the backyard when he paved, so maybe they were still there. Oddly enough, there is a bathroom at our new place with a mystery light that there is no switch for, but turns on and off randomly on its own. I keep telling myself that it's on a timer and we just haven't discovered it yet, but I'll let you know if anything happens with that. So that's, that brings us up to now. Those are all my stories. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for giving us this amazing podcast for so long. It's my favorite, so take care.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine, for all those stories. And again, if you want to participate in Anything Ghost and you have a story to share, send it to lex@anythingghost.com or fill out the form at anythingghost.com. And don't forget about the Anything Ghost VIP group. It's where I house the complete archives of 19 years of Anything Ghost, and you'll have access to every single story that anyone ever heard on Anything Ghost. And there's a one-time membership fee, and you'll have access to all of those stories and more. So check it out. Go to anythingghost.com, join VIP. Anythingghost.com, join VIP. And the next story we have comes from Andra in San Francisco, and she has a couple of dog ghost stories. I wanted to share a unique experience connected to my mom's dog, Radar. My mom used to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Then I decided to give her Radar as a gift, since she always wanted to have a dog. He was part Dachshund and part Chihuahua, and very cute looking, like a little burrito with short legs. Radar brought her much joy and love toward the end of her life, so much so that she cut down on smoking and she began going on more walks, making connections with other people and dogs at our nearby dog park. My mom adored Radar, and they had a deep bond. Sadly, my mom got terminally ill and was going through stage 4 lung cancer and was in hospice. It was a wonderful place in San Francisco called Zen Hospice. It was a beautiful old Victorian house converted into a small-sized hospice. I would take my mom's dog Radar to visit her daily. It was about 8 blocks from my house. Very soon, Radar would recognize the route to see my mom, and he'd eagerly tug at his leash as soon as he got close to the hospice. We would open the door, and Radar would run directly up the stairs into my mom's room and jump on her bed to take a nap with her. After 2 months, my mom passed away peacefully at the hospice. I felt Radar needed some closure and to physically see that my mom was no longer there. So the day after my mom passed, I took Radar one last time to the hospice and let Radar know that my mom was no longer in the room. Opening the door and unleashing him, Radar ran up the stairs and jumped on the empty bed. Of course, that made me cry. Then, all of a sudden, he barked and started intently staring at a spot on the wall, looking upward. His big ears were pointed forward, alert and intent, but not fearful. There was nothing on the wall in the spot he was staring at, but he sat there looking at that one spot in the most intense manner. I knew he could see my mom, and even though I could not see her, I knew my mom was there, letting Radar know she was gone, but that it was going to be okay. Adopting Radar made me feel like a part of my mom lived inside of him, and it gave me great comfort. I do believe our bonds with pets run deep, occasionally making a connection from the other side. My other story is about my dog named Shiva. She was 80 pounds of giant honey bear love. Shiva was part Rottweiler and Chow. It was devastating to hear the news that she had advanced cancer, and I cherished every single moment I had with her. It's a grief we all experience when our furred child passes, a deep grief that hits you in the gut for a long time. Shiva would have this habit of when she would be in a deep sleep and she would dream and make her body move as if she was running, still being fast asleep and lying on her side. She would move her front legs while in that deep sleep. Shiva would often do this while she was sleeping on the rug in the living room. It was a sound distinctive only to her and very familiar. The sound of her running in her sleep while lying down made a very distinctive noise, the sound of the scraping toenails against the carpet, a sort of scratching noise that would be repetitive because of her dream running. Sadly, Shiva's condition had reached a point where she had to be put to sleep. The day after she had crossed the Rainbow Bridge, I was lying in bed early one evening, alone, reading. Then, I heard the very distinct and exact sound that Shiva would make when she was dreaming and moving her legs. It was coming from the living room. I had no other pets, and no one else was in the house. And that sound lasted about 4 minutes, which is pretty long. During that whole time, I sat up in bed to listen, knowing it was her. My first instinct was to call out, Shiva? I know it's you. I love you, honey bear. Something told me that I needn't go to the living room to check it out if it was her, because I knew it was her. And I knew she wouldn't be there, but her spirit was. And she had sent me a message saying that it was okay. I actually never told anyone about this experience. But after hearing that your dog Jetty had passed, I sent you a message. I thought I might share this story with all your listeners. I wholeheartedly believe when a beloved pet dies that we can cherish the memories of our bond together. And having Shiva was a great gift to me, for which I am grateful. Thank you for your podcast, Lex, and take care. Okay, and that was from Andra in San Francisco, and it was one ghost dog experience and one ghost experience a dog had. All right, thanks, Andra. Next up is a story from Dan, and I'm guessing he's in the U.S. Contact through a psychic. I haven't had anything spooky or supernatural happen to me since December of 2018. In that regard, it's been peaceful here. I still miss Kristen every day, though. A mutual acquaintance of my late wife did research out of the blue to contact me back in 2018. His girlfriend had dragged him along to a psychic. He thought it was all hokum, until the psychic looked at him and said, "There's a woman here who wants to speak with you. She recently died of a brain injury. Does that make sense?" Absolutely shocked, he said that it did, and then the psychic asked him if he could pass along a message from the spirit to her still loving partner. The message was that she was doing all right, and she was smiling. This acquaintance's entire world was rocked to the core, but he passed the message along. I listen every month to Anything Ghost, and I've got my VIP membership, and I'm listening to the Gateway tapes. I'm hoping to one day learn how to do an out-of-body experience. We'll see what happens. And again, that was from Dan, and I'm sorry, he must have had a story sent in about Kristen dying, but I couldn't make the correlation here. But anyway, that was from Dan in the U.S. And this next one is, I'm just going to read some email that I got. It was from Aaron in the U.S. Thoughts on Laura of San Francisco's haunted apartment. I'm a long-time Anything Ghost listener, and would like first to thank you for the many amazing stories that you put together throughout the years. I'm a huge fan of all things horror and paranormal, and yours is one of the few podcasts and websites that I have bookmarked. I check them frequently and look forward to updates and additions. That said, why I'm contacting you is this. I just finished listening to the 2024 Mega Macabre collection, and the last story from Laura, I do indeed remember hearing on a previous show. I say this because I believe you mentioned that in your preface to her reading. I was wondering if you had contact with this lady, who originally submitted the story. I have no need to contact her myself, but I just hope that she's still writing and living her best life. For some time, this time as I was listening, something really hit me emotionally. She bravely discusses her own struggles with depression and how it plays into the story. And I was nearly sobbing at the end of her reading, having suffered with the same myself over the years, in addition to struggling with addiction. The two frequently go together, and it sucks. Anyway, I really hope that maybe you contacted her to see if you could play her story again. And is she still around to give the okay? If so, and you don't mind, and if it's not trouble or too inappropriate or anything like that, I would love for her to know that her resilience and her courage to let others, many others, know about her experiences really helps any listeners that might also be suffering similar negative feelings, me being one of those others. From the bottom of my heart and soul, thank you so much to her, and to you for putting it all out there. When listening to her read, one can hear the trepidation in her voice. And I think she even states her hesitation at putting such personal experience out there. Literally, the world to hear and discuss and critique, etc. I really think she should know how important and beneficial it is for others that might be going through the same depression. In closing, I really just hope she is in a good spot right now, and that she hasn't succumbed in any way to her melancholy. It is usually a lifelong battle once diagnosed. And again, it's a suckfest. So I will say it again. Please tell her thank you very much. Keep telling stories, keep writing. What I've heard so far is awesome. Well, I guess I've written a novel here. And if you've actually come this far, thanks to you too. As always, I look forward to the next batch of stories. Take care. Okay, so the Laura story, as most of the longtime listeners remember, was a great story written by Laura in San Francisco. And it was about kind of a doppelganger ghost slash haunted apartment story. And she did an excellent job of writing and reading her experience. And it went over a period of time. And that's the story that he's referring to. And she talks about some depression she was going through and how she overcame it and then got into the ghost thing. So it was really involved and it was really well done. But it came out originally in episode 42, I think. So it was the first year of Anything Ghost, I believe, or maybe the second year. But after releasing the story, I got a lot of correspondence, mostly email from people saying how great that story was. And so people really love it. And I've replayed it like maybe 4 times over the years, maybe more. And it always gets a nice reaction. But yeah, we were in contact for a while. She's doing fine. And she actually sent in a second story. And I don't recall how long ago. It was maybe 5 years, 7 years ago. And so she's doing okay, as far as I know. I think last time I talked to her was a couple years ago. And so that's the story behind Laura in San Francisco. And I have one more story to share. This one's from Valerie in New York. Ghost Book.
I have to tell you this crazy Christmas story. So, you know, my brother and sister-in-law and I are always getting each other like haunted, scary things. And so we get each other, books. And so I open this gift from Vincent and Jenny. And in it is this hand-painted magnet made by this artist, but it's like spooky scary, right? And here's the artist. And then also a book of short stories called Ghostly Populations, and it's got a really spooky photo on the cover, and it looks really scary. And then this book about real ghosts, and we buy each other used books. And so when I opened this, I said, "Oh, I used to have this book when I was little, like maybe 7, 8, or 9. I got it from the Scholastic Book Fair." And like this has a price on it of $1.50, so it's like from that era, right? I was like, I can't believe it. I had this book. And I said, wait, maybe I still have it. And so I look on my bookshelf and there's like a certain number of childhood books that I kept. And I said, no, I got rid of it. And my mom said, you never get rid of books. I'm like, no, I did a purge and I got rid of some childhood books, and it was hard, but it was the right thing to do. You know, I can't keep everything. And I was like, wait, but I feel like I would have kept this one. And I look again on my bookshelf. I go, no, it's not there. I got rid of it. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that you had that book. I'm like, yeah, it'll be good to read this again because like, I don't really remember the content. So it'll be cool. It'll be like a nice little nostalgia. And I open the book and I see that, and I said to Jenny, I go, oh, you wrote my name in the book? I said to remember while you were rapping or something. She goes, I didn't write your name in the book. I said, what? She goes, what's in the book? I says, it says Val in pencil. And I show my mother. She goes, that looks like your handwriting. I said, where'd you buy this? My brother said, either New Hampshire or Massachusetts in a used bookstore. I said, this is my book from childhood. I knew this cover crease was also really familiar. I wrote my name in the book. I got rid of it. It came back to me. This is my book from childhood that my brother and sister-in-law bought in another state and gave it to me more than 40 years later. If that's not a real ghost story.
And actually, I'm going to break my promise on that being the last story for this episode. I found one lying on my desktop, and it was one of my favorite stories in the past. It was from Brianna, and it was in episode 155. And I think somebody had recently asked me about this story, and they found it, and they said, oh, this was it. So I think that's why I had it on my desktop. But it's a great story from episode number 155. And I thought I had it right in front of me, but okay, it was May 5th of 2012, episode number 155. And here is a great haunted house story. Hope you enjoy. And I believe it was called The Old Part of the House. One more story for Anything Ghost number 155. And this is a creepy haunted house story. It's sent to us from Brianna in Virginia. My parents divorced when I was 15. I went with my mother and my little sister, while my brother went with my father. I was pretty torn up about the divorce for several reasons, which initially caused quite a bit of tension between my mother and I. We had moved from the big city where I had lots of friends, 3 states away, to the small town my mother had grown up in, where I knew nobody. My mother had spoken to a realtor and rented a house, sight unseen, for a very reasonable price. When we pulled up, we were in awe. The house was huge, which didn't really make sense for just 3 people to live in. It was gorgeous, L-shaped, 2-story on one side, and 1 story on the other. Inside, the 2 sides were separated by a thick, heavy wooden door. The 1-story side was what they called new, and had been built within the past 50 years. On this side, there were 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, dining room, and a living room. The old side, which was 2 stories, was built in the 1800s, and had a large room that you walked through with a built-in hammock bed, a fireplace, and then a set of stairs that led up to 2 large bedrooms. Also beside the staircase is a door that led to a small, dark, wet cellar that any time we went down into, we would find dead animals. We didn't go down there very often. The first night we slept in the house, I had gotten into a fight with my mom. She decided to sleep in the master bedroom with my little sister on the new side of the house, while I chose one of the upstairs bedrooms in the old side, as far away from my mother as possible. We were separated by the heavy wooden door. Being late spring, the wood in the door had expanded and the door would stick, making it hard to open. When open, it would swing closed on its own. So, that first night, I made my way through the wooden door, slamming it behind me in anger. Then I stomped through the downstairs bedroom, the one with the built-in hammock bed, up the staircase and into my bedroom upstairs, where I slammed that door behind me as well. It was a sweltering night, so I tried opening the window in the room, only to find that all 4 windows were sealed shut. I tried and tried, but they just wouldn't budge. Finally, I gave up and went to bed. I lay there facing the wall, trying to sleep in the heat. My damp hair was stuck on my back, and I just couldn't seem to find a cool spot on my pillow. It was pretty miserable, but I refused to go back down to the new side of the house where my mom was. About a half an hour after I went to bed, I heard the downstairs heavy door open and slam shut. Then I heard heavy footsteps come pounding up the steps, open my bedroom door, and walk to the center of my room. I assumed it was my mother there to scold me for having given her attitude and slamming the doors earlier. I wasn't sure why she had waited so long, so I decided to pretend I was asleep. After a few moments of silence, the footsteps moved to the far window. I heard the window pried open, then slam down once, open again, slam down, and then open and slam a third time. I grew more and more angry. Why was my mother being so passive-aggressive? Why didn't she just speak to me if she was so angry? I kept still, facing the wall. Finally, the steps moved back to the center of the room, stayed for a couple of moments, then walked back to the bedroom door, opened and closed it, and I could hear footsteps retreat back down the stairs. I kept listening for the heavy wooden door to be open again, but I never heard it. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to have breakfast. My mom was still giving me the silent treatment, so I kept my mouth shut. When she left the room, my little sister said, "Mom's really mad at you for last night." I said, "For what? I should be mad at her." She replied, "Because we heard you come through the heavy door into the kitchen, and Mom called out to you, but you ignored her." I said, "I didn't come downstairs last night. Mom came up to my room and slammed my windows." To which she replied, "Mom never left the bedroom at all last night." There were several other things that happened that first summer we lived in that house. I would be doing my homework in the upstairs bedroom and suddenly get the feeling that I was not alone. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I just knew that if I turned around, I would see someone or something standing there. One day, the sound was so strong and so disturbing that I finally yelled out, "Please just leave me alone. I didn't do anything to you." One time, as I was walking up the stairs, I distinctly heard a whisper say, "Pick her up and throw her down." I sprinted the rest of the way up the stairs and slammed my door. After that occurred, any other time I went up or down the stairs, I would always go as quickly as I could, terrified that something would push me down the stairs. Unable to stand it, I finally moved out of the upstairs bedroom and to the bedroom directly below it, the one with the built-in hammock bed. I only slept on the hammock bed 2 nights, as both times I had horrific nightmares and woke up with my entire body hurting. After the 2 nights of sleeping in the hammock bed, I moved my bed down from the upstairs. I slept in the downstairs room for a couple of weeks, but every night I would awaken to heavy footsteps moving up and down the staircase and stomping around upstairs in my old bedroom. I very quickly moved out of the old side of the house completely and into the tiny spare bedroom on the new side. My aunt moved into the old side for less than a month, but quickly moved out, choosing instead to move into a cramped trailer with her son and his rambunctious family. We had a dog that refused to go through the heavy door to the old side. The only time she did, we accidentally closed the door, leaving her, not realizing she was there. We could hear her yelping and barking and scratching at the door. We opened the door, and she ran back to the new side and hid. She was a very calm dog that had never had a problem being left alone before. We lived in the new side of the house for another 6 months, finally moving out by the next spring. My mother did research and found that, back in the 1800s and early 1900s, people rarely went to the hospital, which was several miles away, and generally they were treated for illnesses in their home. It was also standard practice for family members to pass away in their homes with family, rather than go to a hospital. And that's it for Anything Ghost, number 316, the 19th anniversary of Anything Ghost. Thanks, everyone, for all your stories this time around. And if you are interested in having a story in episode number 317 or there beyond, send it to lex@anythingghost.com or go to our website, anythingghost.com, and fill out the form there, the contact form. Okay, everyone, have yourself a wonderful beginning of the new year. And until the next episode, take care.